This hulking Moore Jig Borer from 1938 stands defiant in a dusty workshop, its table scarred from decades of positioning steel plates to within millionths of an inch. A modern CNC mill costing $500,000 warps and drifts from nothing more than a 5-degree room temperature swing, spitting out scrap after a single summer. Why could this brute of iron locate holes with absolute precision without computers, while today's machines chase their own shadows? In the grinding depths of the Great Depression, America's factories churned out parts by the millions, but precision ground to a halt at the 4th decimal place. Mass production lines spat forth pistons, gears, and housings fast enough to feed a starving economy, yet the jigs and dies that guided those parts were riddled with guesswork. Drill a hole off by even 1/1000th of an inch, and entire assemblies failed aircraft wings twisted under load. Engine blocks leaked oil, and the fragile recovery teetered on the edge of collapse. Richard F. Moore, a wiry engineer from Bridgeport, Connecticut, saw the abyss staring back. Factories could stamp metal like pancakes, but without machines to locate those critical holes blindly and perfectly, the whole system crumbled. This wasn't some academic puzzle. It was do or die for an industrial nation clawing out of breadlines, with storm clouds of war gathering over Europe. Moore locked himself in his shop, obsessed with solving the riddle that no one else dared touch: how to make a machine that knew its position to the millionth without eyes, rulers, or electricity. By 1934, Moore had his answer, forged not in silicon dreams, but in the unyielding physics of steel and iron. The secret sauce lay in the lead screw, a colossal shaft of Nitralloy steel, hardened to Rockwell C62, then ground and lapped in a temperature-controlled laboratory to a pitch accuracy of just 30 millionths of an inch. Across its full length, this wasn't a mere mover of tables. It was the machine's very yardstick, geometrically flawless, turning rotation into linear position with no slop, no backlash, no electronic crutches. Wrap your mind around that. Every thread, peak and valley executed to 0.0, so precise that it defined the coordinate system itself, indifferent to where or time. The machine's bed and ways amplified this genius. Massive castings of meionite iron, weighing tons apiece, were hand-scraped by artisans using blued plates and 0.0001-inch feeler gauges, creating bearing surfaces flat to a helium wavelength eliminating stiction, that insidious stick slip that plagues lighter frames. Heat the set up to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and it barely budged. The thermal mass absorbed expansion like a battleship shrugs off waves, holding position where aluminum CNC frames bow and twist, demanding software algorithms to guess corrections. Moore's spindle, a 5-horsepower monster spinning at 2000 RP, plunged carbide-tipped tools into hardened steel with 10 tons of quill force, yet the table below never flinched, locked by the screw's inertial authority. No glass scales to fog up, no servos to whine and fail, just pure mechanical fidelity. Operators dialed in coordinates on engraved dials, and the physics delivered. X and Y axes accurate to 50 millionths over 24 inches of travel. This fortress bored bushings for Pratt & Whitney engine and dies for atomic shielding, birthing the aerospace age without a byte of data. To command such a beast demanded men forged in fire, not keyboards. Skilled jig borers worked in sweltering shops where coolant mist hung thick as fog, lungs burning from chromic acid vapors used to etch reference lines. 12-hour shifts bent backs over 3,000-pound tables, cranking handwheels through viscous oil baths, arms aching from the torque needed to overcome even the screw's butter-smooth resistance. One slip on a sweat-slick floor, and fingers vanished into spinning collets. Amputation was the price of inattention, with shop floors stained by blood long before safety glasses became mandatory. Heat exhaustion felled the unwary iron frames, radiated furnace glow after hours of carbide gnawing steel at 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit cheap temperatures, while the constant whine drilled into eardrums, leaving tinnitus as a lifelong echo. These were no white-collar coders. They were greased, blackened giants, muscles honed by wrestling inertia, eyes trained to spot a 0.00005-inch runout by the shimmer of light on a scraped surface. Moore himself scraped ways, until his hands blistered sleeping in the factory to calibrate screws under moonlight-stable conditions. Danger wasn't a footnote. It was the forge that tempered both man and machine, ensuring every millionth inch hole carried the weight of survival. Decades later, that same Moore Jig Borer hums in a forgotten corner of an Ohio machine shop, still boring prototypes for turbine blades while its digital descendants gather dust. A Boeing 787 assembly jig, reliant on lightweight composites and thermal compensation software, required recalibration every shift last year after a warehouse AC glitch caused million-dollar wings to misalign by thousandths. We traded enduring iron for plastic-geared steppers and firmware updates that brick entire fleets overnight. John Deere tractors turning to a waste from a denied subscription, bridges like Baltimore's Francis Scott Key folding because profit-driven engineers skimped on overbuilt mass for efficient designs. Planned obsolescence whispers that replacement trumps repair. Safety theater mandates sensors over substance, and shareholders demand quarterly yields over century-proof builds. Moore's Way died not from obsolescence, but from our addiction to fragility disguised as progress. Today, that Ohio shop tucked behind rusted rail sidings in Youngstown, where the steel mills once roared, keeps one more alive as a relic of Defiance. Its castings, pitted by half a century of carbide chips and coolant corrosion, still slide with the whisper of oil on scraped ways. Last month, it positioned locating holes in a titanium alloy fixture for GE Aviation turbines, holding plus 0.00005 inches over 18 inches without a recalibration. The owner, a grizzled machinist, named Hank, with hands like leather mitts from 50 years at the wheel, refuses to retire it. This iron doesn't forget, he grunts, while across town, a Haas VF2 CNC sits bricked by a firmware glitch from an essential update, its $80,000 frame warped from a humid week. Servos fried because some engineer in California prioritized cloud connectivity over robust cooling fins. Contrast that endurance with the 2021 Ever Given fiasco in the Suez Canal, where a $400 million container ship built with computer-modeled hulls and lasers, propellers grounded because its rudder bushings, machined on modern 5-axis mills, drifted 0.002 inches under thermal load from the desert sun. Those mills, lightweight aluminum extrusions with plastic-reinforced linear guides, expanded unevenly despite predictive algorithms, turning global trade into a $9 billion standstill. No massive thermal mass to stabilize them, just frantic programmers patching code via satellite, while the Moore in Ohio would have bored those bushings. Stone-cold aqueduct, it's Nitralloy, screw indifferent to the Egyptian heat. We could have overbuilt those ships, like the old Liberty freighters, whose jigboard engine mounts survived Atlantic convoys and Pacific typhoons without drifting a hair. Zoom out to Aerospace, where Moore's precision seeded the B-29 superfortress bombers that firebombed Tokyo. In 1943, Bridgeport shops ran 24/7, boring nacelle mounts, 4 right R3350 engines each hull, located to 40 millionths amid blackout drills and rationed electricity. Those airframes took 500 miles per hour dives over Iwo Jima. Gunners' mounts never loosening because the jigs held absolute. Fast forward to the 737 MAX crises, software-dependent flight control computers, housed in composites, jigged on temperature-sensitive CNCs, suffered actuator misalignments from factory floor variances as small as 0.0015 inches. Boeing's modern supply chain, chasing just-in-time inventory, swapped cast-iron fixtures for carbon fiber ones that ballooned in the summer heat of Renton, Washington plants. Pilots fought phantom nose-down trims, not from rogue code alone, but from holes that wandered because no one builds fortresses. Any more profit margins, sliced to the safety factor from 10 to 1 to 1.5 to 1, dooming 346 souls, even in the atomic shadows of the Manhattan Project. More machines punched the coordinates for uranium enrichment dies at Oak Ridge. Operators in lead, aprons hand-cranked tables under Geiger chatter, positioning orifices for gaseous diffusion barriers to 30 mil, where a micron's slop meant cascade failure and bomb yields cut in half. That brute force birthed Trinity's fireball, then Hiroshima's. Now, Moore. Nuclear simulators run on server farms where GPU clusters cooled by plastic impeller fan crash from thermal Their mounting holes drilled on Gangxi require daily laser interferometer resets after overnight. Fukushima's backup diesel frames jigged on lightweight routers with belt-driven axes, sheared pins when earthquakes flexed them. Brittle polymer bushings shattered. No inertial mass to damp the shakes. We prioritize green, recyclable plastics over meionite's unyielding density. Then act shocked when quakes expose the sham. Agriculture fares no better in this era of disposable iron. John Deere's 8R tractors, once overbuilt behemoths, now embed emissions modules that demand $1,200 annual subscriptions, or they limp at 5 miles per hour software bricks from updates, overriding physical limp home modes. The hitch pins and drawbar holes, machined on high-speed verticals with ceramic bearings that gall under dust, drifting 0.003 inches after 500 hours because linear encoders fog with condensation. No hand-scraped ways to trust. Meanwhile, a restored 1940s Farmel H, its jigs bored on moors, plows fields from dawn to dusk, holes tight as the day they were cut. Farmer's curse as combines halt mid-harvests from denied diagnostics, e-waste piling in barns, while the old ways rot in scrapyards we can't afford to melt. Bridges tell the starkest tale. The 2024 Baltimore collapse of the Francis Scott Key wasn't just a ship strike. Forensic reports cite corroded gusset plates with bolt holes, elongated 0.010 inches, from vibration legacy of 1970s. CNC retrofits on the original jigs were steel frames heated and cooled daily, ball nuts wearing oval without backup physics. The old Chesapeake Bay Bridge, with 1930s jigboard anchors, shrugged off nor'easters for 80 years. Today's designs skimp, thin-walled high-strength steel, profit-optimized to the decimal. No tonnages of iron to absorb sway. Safety theater slaps on IoT strain gauges that fail when batteries die. Ignoring the true redundancy comes from mass, not monitors. We stopped because quarterly earnings trump eternity. General Electric shuttered Bridgeport in the 80 segundos, outsourcing to Asia's speed over substance. Shareholders feast on 20% margins from modular machines that ship circuits proprietary to lock in service contracts. Regulations mandate ergonomic lightweight frames for operators, ignoring that real men thrived on the heft. Progress, it's a velvet trap. Sleek apps mask the rust beneath, turning craftsmen into button pushers who reboot when physics disagrees. Yet, whispers persist. Underground shops in Texas restore moors for space jigs, boring Starship fuel ports where NASA's 5-axis mills falter in Houston humidity. A new generation, scarred by bricked Teslas and glitchy 3D printers, scavenges, auctions for cast iron salvation. The cost of this so-called progress, a world adrift on servos and subscriptions, fragile as glass before the storm. But those whispers grow into a low rumble, echoing from bunkered garages in Detroit, where XGM toolmakers resurrect more no. 3 South, 4 custom EV battery trays. Last year, one such machine serial number 1427, shipped in 1942, bored alignment holes in nickel-cobalt cathodes for Rivian prototypes, nailing positions to 40 millionths amid the acrid bite of lithium mist, while Tesla's gigafactory lines halted for weeks when orbital sanders on carbon fiber jigs warped from battery test heat, scattering million-dollar packs like confetti. No algorithms to blame here, just the screw's eternal geometry. Threads unmarred after 80 years of solvent baths and chip grit. Across the Pacific, a surviving Moore in a Nagaya museum doubles as a training beast for Mitsubishi Heavy, who marvel as it positions turbine blade routes for next-gen fighters. Japan's Arling Arsen Akashi Kachyo Bridge retrofit exposed the frailty. CNC's bored anchor sockets that elongated under saltwater spray cycles, forcing a $2 billion shutdown because polymer-coated ways swelled 0.005 inches in 90% humidity. The old iron. It shrugs off monsoons, its meionite mass, diffusing stress like continental crust, demanding no lithium-ion backups or remote diagnostics that glitch in typhoon blackouts. Oil patch legends persist too. In the Permian Basin, a 1951 Moore Special Powers, a West Texas wildcatter shop, drilling frac sleeve ports for horizontal bores that tap shale at 10,000 feet. It outlasted the 2022 Eagle Ford bust. When Halliburton's 5-axis gangs aluminum portals, with graphite wased from silica dust infiltration, their belt drives snapping under torque because engineers chased weight savings for truckable rigs. Fracking crews lost months reprovisioning, idled amid $120 oil, while the Moors scraped surfaces seal against abrasion. Quill-dropping tools into Inconel with the thud of inevitability. Pump jacks from the 70 Segundos jigged on these brutes still gnawed through sandstorms. Linkages unlike modern rod boxers, cracking from vibration on optimized polymer pins. Even consumer realms bear scars of forgotten fortitude. A hobbyist in Pennsylvania fired up a 1936 Moore Jr. last fall to fixture holes for a custom AR. Achieving sub-millionth fits that group Samoa at 600 yards precision, no desktop mill matches without $10,000. Encoders that delaminate in garage saunas. Meanwhile, Glock's Gen 5 slides, machined on high-volume Duzon Horizon. Shoboro lug play after 5,000 rounds, plastic feed ramps, galling brass, because thermal loops can't outpace the iron's inertia. We flood gun shops with upgrades, but the real loss is marksmanship forged by tools that don't forgive slop. Healthcare exposes the rot deepest. In a Cleveland medtech fab, a restored 1947 Moore bores titanium hip stems, locating acetabiola remors to 25 millionths for implants that outlive patients. Contrast to Zimmer Biomet's 2024 recall. 50,000 knee joints yanked because CNC-drilled peg holes migrated 0.007 inches from autoclave sterilizations. Lightweight gantry frames bowing under plasma torch glow. Surgeons sliced into hips with offsets that eroded cartilage twice as fast, all because lean manufacturing gutted overbuilds for inventory turns. Patients limp on e-waste prosthetics, while Moore's patients walked marathons decades later. Automotive graveyards whisper warnings. Ford's F-150 Lightning frames, jigged on Fanuc robots with fiberglass tables, suffered weld distortions last winter when Michigan plants hit -10 Fahrenheit. Holes drifted 0.004 inches. Axles binding under load tests. A 1965 Mustang coupe, its K-code mounts bored on Bridgeport moors, drags main streets unmodified, quarter-mile times untouched by entropy. Detroit's C-suite swapped scrapers for spreadsheets, chasing EV subsidies over Dynaproof mass, leaving trucks that crumple from potholes their grandfathers ate for breakfast. The pivot came in boardrooms, not shops. By 1985, Fanuc and Haas peddled affordable CNCs at $50,000 a pop. Fast, hooked to Windows NT that crashed on Y2K. Bridgeport's doors slammed as Nitralloy grinding labs shuttered. Who needs millionth-inch screws? When servos jittered to 0.001 and blame the operator? EPA choked chromic etching. OSHA banned 12-hour heroics for 8-hour siestas unions, priced hand-scraping out of existence. Asia flooded markets with knockoffs castings porous as Swiss cheese. Screws from mystery steel that pit after 1,000 hours. Profit decreed disposability. Lease the mill. Upgrade yearly. Bury the old and re-energize landfills, leaching PFAs into aquifers. Global supply chains sealed the tomb. COVID snarls. Idled Taiwan fabs, where iPhone dies, warp from monsoon flux. No backup iron fortresses. Boeing's 777X slats fixtured on temperature-hysteretic VMCs, grounded fleets when Delrin bushings swelled, echoing Moore's stability we scorned for sustainable synthetics that biodegrade into Today, fewer than 200 Moores grind worldwide half, in museums like the American Precision Museum in Vermont, where, non cinco, from 1939, demos for school kids, table gliding under fingertip nudge. Ohio's Hank nurses his daily, blending proprietary lapping compound from vintage recipes. Turbine jobs, paying the electric. Texas outlaws hoard them for Artemis landers. Boring hypergolic valve seats, where SpaceX's Tasmills chatter out in Florida brine. The legacy endures in the shadows, a gauntlet thrown to our servo-shackled age. We bartered eternity for ephemera trillions in e-waste. Skills eroded to memes. Civilizations teetering on firmware threads. Progress. It's the siren's call luring us onto rocks of our own forging, where iron once anchored the storm. The Moore reminds us, true power isn't in speed or screens, but in the quiet defiance of physics unbowed, demanding we reclaim the brute honesty of build or break.